Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to blogging on the LinkedIn publishing platform and a roundup of all the latest tech stories in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Massive warm welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, whether it be airlines or banks, in the last 6 months alone, there are countless examples of companies going offline and freezing out their customers due to releasing a technical change without adequate testing or even rollback plans. But it doesn't have to be like that. And this is where I recently came across a company called Tricentis. Now, they're a software testing startup with dual headquarters both in Vienna and Silicon Valley. And earlier this year, they secured a $165 million funding round from a single investor called Insight Venture Partners. But the company's CEO is Sandeep Johri, and he should know all about the software testing space, considering he led HP's acquisition of industry leader Mercury Interactive way back in 2006 for $4.5 billion. But this is not a show about the past, but where these tech journeys are heading to the future. So when I heard that Tricentis has also recently acquired Australian-based load testing platform Flood.io, with some heavyweight clients to boot, such as AT&T, NEC, ABC, Blue and Bloomberg, to name but a few, it was long overdue to get them on the show today. So buckle up, hold on tight, because it's time to beam your ears all the way to Silicon Valley so we can speak with Sandeep Johri, the CEO of Tricentis. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Sandeep. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
So, hi, my name is Sandeep Johri. I'm the CEO of Tricentis. I joined Tricentis about 4 years ago in 2013. And we'll talk more about the company, but a quick background on myself. I've been in Silicon Valley for about 30 years now and have been in tech ever since I graduated from Stanford with a business degree. I've started a few companies. I've worked at large companies like Silicon Graphics and HP, and I'm excited to be at Tricentis for the last few years now.
And Tricentis have got a fantastic history as well, haven't they? Because I think they were founded way back in 2007 in Vienna, Austria. Now got some pretty big name clients on your roster as well, including the likes of Toyota, BMW, Starbucks, Salesforce, SAP and Oracle. I mean, it's fantastic. But can you tell me a little about that history and how you got where you are now?
So Tricentis, yes, it was started in Vienna by two founders, Wolfgang Platz, who was the original visionary for the product, and Franz Fuchsberger, who helped with sales and the like. And Wolfgang built the product because he didn't like any of the tools out there for test automation, and built it primarily to help himself. And then realized that the customers really liked the tool, so he started selling it. Brought on Franz as a co-founder, and since then they've been selling it to the enterprise customers in the European market. I learned about the company in 2013 and thought it was a fantastic product and a great next generation tool that the market needed, and that's why I joined the company. So the company has over 300, 400 actually customers, all large enterprises. Every brand name you would probably recognize. So, we're doing good. Now we are global and really play in all three geographies, Europe, the US, and Asia as well.
Now, as someone that cut his teeth in IT, I've seen what happens when people fail to take testing seriously on more times than I care to mention. But for the benefit of anyone listening that might not be too familiar with the various methods and the importance around testing, can you explain exactly what Tricentis does and also what makes your approach to testing unique from all the other solutions out there?
Yeah, so, for large enterprises, when they release pretty much anything they do today has some software component to it, right? Whether you're launching a new program, whether you want to add some functionality for your customers or anything. And so whatever they're doing, they need to have some software impact. When you make changes to software, especially in large complex applications like a trading application or a insurance company with its claims processing, they need to make sure that they have tested the product, the changes, to make sure that it does what they intended to do, and two, that their system can hold up to the demands from the customers in terms of the volume of traffic that they will get. And that's basically the most simplified version of what software testing in an enterprise is. Now, obviously, it is extremely important to do it because if you get something wrong, like let's say if you're an insurance company and you start giving out the wrong code, or you drop some of the beneficiaries, that can have huge implications on business. Or if you're a bank and the money transfer doesn't go out accurately, it can have huge implications. So testing becomes very, very important. Now, traditionally, testing has been done manually, believe it or not. What people do is they develop the software, then they send it to some offshore, lower-cost geography, and have people manually test every scenario. And that, you can imagine, is very difficult, very expensive, takes a lot of time, and doesn't suit today's environments of needing rapid change and rapid deployments. And that's what we solved. We solved that by automating all of that testing.
Now, you did simplify things there beautifully. It is a very complicated world to actually live in. I mean, for anyone that doesn't actually exist within those testing environments, can you tell me a little bit more about methodologies such as continuous testing and test automation, and also the differences between those two methodologies?
Let me give you just a minute on how it is done historically and even today. Yeah. Like I said, most of the time people develop in an environment what is known as waterfall, where the dev team spends 2-3 months developing new features, functionality, throws it over the wall to testing, in this case, typically offshore partners who do the testing. They come back after 8 weeks saying, here's all the problems we ran into. And then that cycle goes on, and you can imagine this takes a lot of time. In the new world, where everyone's trying to move faster with digital transformation and the like, that 2-month, 3-month, even 6-month cycles don't work. And the idea of continuous testing is that as developers start developing things with an agile methodology where they're building, shorter breaks and scrums, if you may, shorter scrums, where they're building the product on a daily basis or a weekly basis, you want to be testing it continuously at the same cadence. And that is what is, to put it very simply, that's what is continuous testing. So if your build cycle on your development is a week, before you start the next build, you should have tested everything to catch errors rapidly. If your build cycle is daily, you should be testing it daily to make sure you don't start making the next set of builds or the next set of enhancements without having tested the previous build. And that's what we enable.
So what are the concerns with, let's say, automated testing? I mean, is it fragmentation and the lack of end-to-end solutions, or are there many other problems that people just forget along the way too?
So even in today's kind of without Tricentis, there are tools out there that allow you to automate. The challenge that they face is that you are effectively using scripts to write little automation thingies, right? Automation scripts that allow you to then test automatically. The problem with that is that a multifold problem. One, writing those scripts is pretty complicated. So you need technical resources, kind of developers writing those scripts. And as we all know, there's a huge shortage of developers. You can't afford that many developers to be writing your automation scripts. The second part is when you're making rapid changes, the scripts start breaking because what you've just changed the name or changed the layout or changed the logic of the application, and the old script doesn't work. So people start having to maintain the scripts, and the maintenance of the scripts becomes such a problem that people give up on automation. That's kind of the challenge with automation. And what we do is we are scriptless. You don't, the challenge with scripts is you're essentially writing software to test software. So you get into a recursive problem where once you get a new piece of software, now you need to go test it. You need to write new software or new scripts to test it. And that becomes a nightmare. So we are scriptless, and that's and very robust and resilient to change, And that's what allows us to automate to 90 plus level.
Now, we've already mentioned that you've got hundreds of the largest enterprises in the world and all those household names that you guys look after. But I think it's also worth pointing out that Tricentis is also recognised as the continuous testing leader in both the Forrester Wave and the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I mean, this kind of recognition has to be a significant indication that you're onto something quite special here. But what is it that you think makes Tricentis stand out from the crowd, in your opinion?
So the reason they recognize us as the innovative leader, and we are the only independent kind of private company that is recognized as a leader, and it's primarily because of our approach, which is fundamentally different from the commercial vendors out there, like an HP or an IBM, or even open source tools. All those tools are script based. And the problems that I just stated about script-based tools are present in all those tools, whether you look at commercial or open source. We have a different approach. We have a scriptless approach, and we have something called model-based automation, where we can essentially create a model of the test, and the model is a lot more robust, a lot more resilient. And the fact that so that's kind of the fundamental differentiation. The other problem that you touched upon earlier is that when you get into a large enterprise, you typically have a mix of modern and legacy systems. So you might have modern web front ends and mobile front ends, but then all the core applications at the back are some legacy application. Literally every technology that has ever been invented is still there somewhere in the enterprise. So for you to do end-to-end testing, you really need to cover that whole spectrum, and we cover that whole spectrum all the way from mainframes to mobile and web front ends.
Now, there's also a lot of talk this year about the digital transformation of just about everything. I mean, but what part do you see Tricentis playing in helping enterprises advance through this digital transformation that I think so many businesses would happily admit that they're more than a little nervous about?
Yeah, so what's happening is almost every business out there, whether you're a car company or a retailer or a bank or an insurance company, there's a huge pressure to get into the digital transformation. And essentially what that translates into is for them to develop software faster, release it faster, and truly become a digital enterprise. When they do that, one of the first things they do is they adopt agile methodologies for their dev teams so that things can move faster. And that's why as soon as you talk about digital transformation, which is a business term, from an IT perspective, it translates into, okay, we got to do DevOps so that we can develop and move it to operations as quickly as possible, and be as agile as an Amazon or a Netflix and the like. So as they adopt agile methodologies, they need to have testing be at the same cadence. So if they're developing faster, they need to be testing faster. And that's where we play our role, because if you develop fast, but your testing is still the old way, you haven't really moved the needle on shipping things faster, or you're taking on a lot of risk to ship things without testing.
Do you have any use cases or examples of clients and how your work has transformed their approach to testing and the results it's delivered? I appreciate you probably can't name too many of them because they are some big named enterprises, but I was just curious if you do have any examples you could refer to.
Yeah, we have I can give you a couple. We have a large financial institution in the U.S., which is a large credit card processing company. And if you think about a credit card processing company, they transact literally millions of transactions every day. There are new payment methods, new credit card providers, new the chip, for example, in the credit card is a new way to authenticate people. So there's a lot of changes happening. And they used to have, I think, 30,000 odd scripts that they had written to try and automate things when they make any changes. Well, 30+ thousand scripts to do it manually or to maintain them was a nightmare. Yeah. And now we have helped them get to continuous delivery, where they are catching errors earlier in the process. They are doing a weekly cycle on shipping things. So what used to take them 6 weeks to push out there now takes them a week, and we did this at a significantly lower cost than what they had before. So they're really happy campers. We have similar examples from an online bank in Australia, that if you can imagine, if you're an online bank, you need to be making changes really fast, otherwise your competitors are going to get ahead of you. And we have a similar story there. Almost every customer, we take them from 6 to 8 week release cycles, sometimes for very complicated systems, even 6-month release cycles, and moving them to a testing cycle that is often daily and a release cycle that is often in weeks as opposed to months before.
Now, you mentioned Australia there. I believe that Tricentis has already funded to over 170 million, but you recently snapped up the Australian-based load testing platform called Flood.io. I mean, for the benefit of the listeners, I believe that Flood.io deals with 5,000 organisations globally, including, again, some big names. AT&T, NEC, ABC and Bloomberg, to name but a few. But can you tell me a little about that deal and ideally what it means for Tricentis too?
Yeah, so yes, we are very excited about the acquisition we just did with Flood.io. We have a great team. They're based in Australia, but they're really they have a global presence. So Tricentis, there's two major aspects of testing. The testing that I talked about for an enterprise. Yeah. One is what is known as functional testing, to make sure that what you have developed does what you intended it to do. And once that is working, you need to make sure on the second aspect, which is performance or load testing, to make sure that your system can handle the workload that is going to come from your users. So Tricentis traditionally had functional testing, and now with Flood, we have added load testing. So you can imagine a bank or a customer, they make some change, they first test it functionally, 100%, make sure everything's working okay. As soon as they do that, they want to load it with synthetic users, because you're, let's say, expecting 10,000 users to hit you at the peak. You want to test your application with 10,000 users, so we can use Flood for that. So it truly becomes continuous testing, where you do the developers release the product, we test it functionally in a fully automated way, we then load it to make sure that the app can handle it, and you're done with it. So the continuous testing story of functions needed are the functional testing and the load testing, and Flood brings us the load testing aspect, and they're fully cloud-based. They support all the open source load testing tools, so you could literally spin up, you could say, I want to initially test it with 10,000 users, but in reality, I'm expecting 100,000. So it worked well for 10,000. Now let me load it up with 100,000 users. And we can do that instantly with a flip of a switch. And because it's all cloud-generated load coming right off of AWS.
Now, we've got listeners to this show in over 150 countries, and I couldn't help but notice that in the next few months, I believe you're holding a continuous testing conference here in Europe, in Vienna indeed, called Accelerate 2017. So just in case there is anybody that's in any of those neighbouring countries or would like to visit, can you tell the listeners a little about that conference?
Yes, so Accelerate is obviously our own user conference, but it is becoming the best conference to go for continuous testing. So we have customers and testers coming from, I think, over 15 countries worldwide. And we're going to have a lot of CIOs there who are going to talk about digital transformation, and why is it important, and what are the critical success factors for digital transformation, especially as it relates to testing and how to implement continuous testing. We're going to have a lot of showcases on the latest features, functionality, and also customers are going to be talking about how they have implemented these things, what are the lessons learned, what are the best practices. So we really make it into a 2-day deep dive into the state of the art of continuous testing and DevOps and digital transformation, therefore.
Well, a huge thank you for coming on the show today. But before I let you go, can you just advise the listeners of your website and the best ways of contacting a member of your team if they wanted to reach out or got any questions about anything we've spoken about today?
Yeah, so our website is, as you would expect, www.tricentis.com, Tricentis. Our website is very rich with all kinds of content that people can go through. We have a YouTube channel, a Twitter feed, we have a LinkedIn presence, so there's plenty of content out there. And there's email links on the website to connect with anybody. To request information. If someone needs to connect with me, they're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. Sandeep Johri on LinkedIn is easy to find, and they can also send me an email at s.johri, Johri, at tricentis.com.
Well, like I said at the beginning of the show, I've seen what happens when people, or indeed companies, fail to take testing seriously on more times than I care to mention. And I think there is a reputation now that a lot of the larger enterprises have become a little bit sluggish in their old processes, and it slows them down compared to the younger, more agile startups. But the fact that you're working with these enterprises and actually making sure they take testing seriously, and as a result are enjoying fantastic success, and that's only going to continue, is a great thing. So a big thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Neil. I should mention it's a very good point about the risk of not testing. For that matter, we track this on a quarterly basis and publish a report of all the major failures, software-related failures, across the world at large enterprises, which you and your readers might be interested in going through. It's on our website. But again, Neil, thanks a lot for hosting me, and thank you to your listeners as well for taking the time.
I read a great quote by Sandeep where he said that times have changed. Old performance testing approaches are too late, too heavy, and too slow for today's lean, fast-paced delivery pipelines. And I've seen firsthand the pressure that IT departments are under to be the primary driver for how fast a business can respond to the market and drive those new competitive advantages all through technology. But equally, we have all seen what happens on the flip side of that coin when solutions, tech or code is released into live environments without being tested. And when an entire bank goes offline, payments fail to transfer, for example, customers will just use it as an excuse to go elsewhere. Maybe it's my cautious IT side with a belts and braces approach that must have testing signed off and for it to go through change control before we even think about putting something into live. But enterprises must take testing seriously. But what I love about Sandeep's story here at Tricentis, and also indeed Crystal's a few weeks ago at Testlio, is that testing is being speeded up to fit our fast-paced times. I think we've hammered home the importance of testing, but as always, remember, this is your show. So keep those thoughts, insights, comments and questions coming through. As always, it's been a pleasure to serve you, my audience, and I hope you'll come back again tomorrow for another great guest. But thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.